Now I'd like to welcome Marion McConnell, who is a founding member of an organisation called Family and Friends for Drug Law Reform. Marion has a personal story to tell, and she's been involved in the fight against these harsh laws for the last 15 years, I believe. Thanks, Marion.
I'm pleased to be here today to take part in this launch of a political party which is solely dedicated to raising awareness of our unjust, harmful and anti-family prohibition drug laws. I am a founding member of Families and Friends for Drug Law Reform, an organisation which was established in 1995 following a spate of heroin overdose deaths. The families of those who died felt that drug prohibition was more the problem than the solution, and were committed to preventing the tragedy that arises from heroin use. This was almost 18 years ago, and we are still struggling to get any significant change. And of course, it has moved on. Heroin is not the only drug now. We have many more dangerous, so-called dangerous drugs. My husband and I were first confronted with the harms caused by our drug laws just 2 weeks before our son died of a heroin overdose. His friend awakened us in the early hours to say that our son was in trouble on an oval not far from our home. My daughter called the ambulance, and we were so thankful that the ambulance officers came quickly and quietly and efficiently revived our son. They told us that he had overdosed on heroin. We were shocked because this was the first we knew of his heroin use. Unfortunately, as it turned out, the police also arrived on the scene not long after the ambulance. They harassed my daughter and me, as well as his friend who had alerted us. Our son was pleased to go in the ambulance to the hospital. The police followed. Of course, we also went to the hospital, but were told to wait in the waiting room while the police were allowed to go to his bedside. We were given no information and no advice. My son awoke at the hospital with the police at the end of his bed. The interrogation by police frightened him. He discharged himself. In the following 2 weeks, we saw little of him. He was afraid that the police would call, as they had threatened. He took a hurried holiday on his own. This time there was no friend to save him when he overdosed again, just 2 weeks later, alone in a motel room. He was just 24 years old. That night on the Oval, I was overwhelmed by a sense that these laws were unjust. My son had not hurt anyone. The ambulance officers had saved him, and my husband and I and his sister wanted and needed the time to help him, and he wanted that help. But the intervention of police frightened him away. As a society, we so often harshly judge those who use illicit drugs and don't consider the big picture of the multi-billion-dollar drug industry, the crime and corruption which promotes the use of these drugs. Many still believe that the users deserve what they get. Our son had successfully completed a degree in computer science just 6 months before he died. He was in full-time work. He was very skilled in mathematics and computing. He was school captain in primary school, received distinctions in the Australasian mathematics competition throughout his schooling. Surely he deserved the chance to live through his drug taking. At that time, I did not blame the police, as I thought they were doing the job which governments placed before them. But as time goes on, and I have seen little change in laws or policies, I believe that we can hold governments responsible for laws which are not based on research or evidence, and which make the life for families experiencing problematic drug use much, much more difficult. There has been many well-respected organisations and individuals saying that drug prohibition has failed and that governments should be prepared to look to alternatives. Unfortunately, our major parties do not seem interested in doing so. Families and Friends for Drug Law Reform presented a petition to our local ACT Assembly some months ago asking for a bipartisan discussion on alternatives to drug prohibition, and it was ignored. After 20 years of trying to get governments to look to evidence and review the present drug laws, I am pleased that this soon-to-be-formed political party is taking on this worthy cause. I have confidence that it will steer the drugs debate off its current dead-end track and force governments into exploring and implementing alternatives which are more just, less harmful and favour families over organised crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. It was very emotional talk, and I appreciate that it came from the heart and certainly touches me, having personally recovered from my own drug addiction. And I have great sympathy for your son that wasn't as lucky as I was.